Bandung spirit and the Indonesia's regional vision, which is so central, not just because they are hosting country, but they have this long legacy. And it would be good to have this insight. This team is composed by Mr. Himawan, Bayu, Patriadi, and Mr. Agus, Trihartono. And we'll have the honor to have Abubakar, maybe Hara, who will present first. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. As mentioned, my paper is written together with two colleagues, but they are able to come, so I represent them to present the paper. So basically, our paper is about how Indonesia is attempting to promote its foreign policy visions in Southeast Asia. In this paper, we tend to argue that the nature and character of the Southeast Asia region that we see now, to a certain degree, are a reflection of Indonesian world vision. And in this paper, a few questions that will be addressed are: what are actually the Indonesian regional visions? How do they relate to Bandung spirit, and how have they been promoted in the region? And how do the vision change and become mixed? And I will break my presentation into three parts: the approach of this paper, and then what are the institutions, and lastly about ASEAN as an example of Bandung spirit, the implementation of Indonesian visions. So actually, if we follow neo-realist and neoliberalist approach, we cannot understand the Bandung spirit, because according to this approach, they see that the behavior of states or state and region depend on the international structure, either bipolar or multipolar. And there is no way that what countries can do something in neoliberalist and liberalist approach. But I think they are not, this approach are not entirely right, because they disregard vision, spirit, solidarity, indigenous efforts and practices of relation conducted among the state in the region. The Bandung spirit is one example of how ideas can have strong appeal to form regional identity. So as we know, the spirit of Bandung spirit, among others, are peaceful existences, independence and liberation, the equality of all races, and equality of all nations, solidarity, social cooperation. Now, because of its strong appeal, certain academics say that norms produced by Bandung spirit are equal to the Treaty of East Westphalia in 1648. Okay, Indonesia is one of main proponent of constructing and socializing these spirits. At the beginnings, Indonesia orientation is global, but later they pay attention more to its regions. So next, I will show how Indonesian regional vision have been developed, which also are to a larger degree inspired by Bandung spirits. The development of Indonesian regional visions, and there will be 4 regions that will be discussed, and 4 dominant visions to be discussed related to the development of Indonesian regional visions. So the regions is divided, if you know in politics, we have 4 regimes. We call it parliamentary democracy regime, Sukarno-Gaya democracy regime, Suharto Pancasila democracy regime, and post-Suharto regimes. So each regime have different emphasis on what visions Indonesia should have and promoted in its region, but at the end they are all contributed to the characters and identity of Indonesian foreign policy. So vision number 1 is independent and active. This becomes a doctrine of Indonesian foreign policy. It is declared immediately after the independence by Prime Minister Muhammad. So in this speech, he said something like, the government argues that the position we should take is that we should not become the object of international politics competition, but we should still be subject with the right to determine our own positions and have the right to fight for our own purpose, namely comprehensive independent Indonesia. So they don't want to take side in the conflicts between the East and the West and try to take their own path. So this is initially declared after independence, but it was constructed during the parliamentary democracy session in 1945 to 1959. So during there was a lot of debate regarding this principle, and there is a control from the parliament to the government policies. If the government tend to take side and tend to lean more to the West, for example, then there will be criticism from the government. And one of the prime minister, the Sukiman cabinet fall because it's leading too much to the U.S. So there was very dynamic parliamentary during that time that maintained Indonesia in the non-alignment corridor. And during this period as well, we have this Asia and Africa Conference in Bandung. Second question is anti-imperialism and anti-colonialism. It is popular during Sukarno period. During Sukarno period, Sukarno did not actually use the independent and active identity as formulated by the prior regime. Instead, Sukarno represented Indonesia as a revolutionary, anti-colonialist, and anti-imperialist state, which said well his ambition to lead the third world countries and to unite his nations. And during this time, there is no parliamentary control because Suharto disbanded parliament, so he is the only power, and he can define Indonesian identity with the support of his close allies. So, and the attention to the region during this time was started, particularly at the time they have two regional organizations, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which include Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines, but Indonesia didn't want to join because this organization was considered as serving the Western interests. The other organization is Mafindo, Malaysia, Filipina, and Indonesia. Indonesia joined this organization, but the main aim is to hinder the formation of Malaysian federations. And during his time, Sukarno launched the so-called confrontation against Malaysia because he thought that Malaysia was part of the British, part of the imperialist bloc. And then after Sukarno, we have the third vision in Indonesian foreign policy. We call it the vision of development and modernization. So after Sukarno fall down, we have Suharto regime in power from 1966 to 1998. So he still said, mentioned about independent and active foreign policy. However, the identity that his regime wanted to promote and to show to the international community was identity as a development state and not as an expansion state like during the Suharto times. And this made it possible for Indonesia to get economic support from and cooperation with the West. And this new approach was welcomed by the countries in the region. So attention to the region during Suharto time was very strong, since Indonesia needs stable region that can uphold its development program. So during Suharto period, he clearly wanted to take distance and contrast with Sukarno foreign policy. He ended confrontation against Malaysia. He formed ASEAN as part of the indigenous efforts following the failure of previous regional organization, ASEAN and Mafindo. And he unite ASEAN politically and ideologically, reduce tension amongst members of ASEAN, build confidence among them, united fronts against colonial strikes in Vietnam, but they are also terrible with the Chinese threat. And of course, they have make a distance with SEATO, the Southeast Asia Treaty Organizations, which is under the Western influence. And also they support the so-called ASEAN way. So the way this is a kind of practicing peaceful coexistence. They make emphasis on non-intervention principle in ASEAN, and they have a consensus in making decisions, and they try to not to blame each other. They try to save face in solving problems. And also in ASEAN, they have treaty, the so-called ASEAN Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, which is, in my opinion, is a continuation of the Bandung Declaration, because it contains independent principles, sovereignty, equality, territorial integrity, free from external interference. So all of these things are, I think, in my opinion, similar to, almost similar to Bandung spirit, Bandung Agreement, and it is put exactly in the ASEAN Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. Okay, last visions of Indonesian foreign policy in this region is democracy. So this happened after the fall of Suharto. After the fall of Suharto, Indonesia have this democratic system, and the so-called revolution era under President Habibie, who replaced Suharto, continued by Hamah and Megawati. Identity as democratic state started to be performed to the international community. President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono continued this construction of identity as democratic state by enunciating the concept named Medium Friends, Zero Enemy. Okay. Then, so during this time, Indonesia was able to solve East Timor problem. So they had a referendum on East Timor, which was a problem for Indonesia for a long time because of the human rights issues. And with this policy, particularly during Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono times, they tried to have an outward-looking policy, and this is kind of Wilsonian perspective of foreign policy, and also they created Bali Democratic Forum. And the result of this approach is that we have people-centered ASEAN, we have ASEAN Community, ASEAN Charter, and then ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, ICHR. Okay, and conclusions. So this paper is about how Indonesia has attempted to create a region in its own image. To an extent, has been successful is a matter of debate. But from nature and character of the relation in this region, as reflected in ASEAN cooperation, the ideal vision, which are also inspired by Bandung spirits, is reflected in workplace norms and practices of relation in this region. However, I think we're not discussing it, but there are questions like here: what is the meaning of peaceful relation and respect for sovereignty for the people in these regions? Has sovereignty and non-intervention principle become needs? Indonesia, I think, faces important dilemma in this region. It has commitment to sovereignty and non-interference principle, but on the other hand, it has also commitment to social justice, human rights, and democracy for the people in Southeast Asia. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for this important statement. As you know, the country is so crucial in the Northern movement. So, Mr. Abubakar really highlights the importance of this Bandung spirit as almost the equivalent of the Westphalian pattern, and he showed 3 or 4 periods regional approach with an active anti-imperialist and the prospect of the Malay War from 1960s to 99. We had this Suharto period, more aligned on the West and political regional beginning of regional integration. And the third part being the democratic period with zero enemy strategy, with Wilsonian foreign policy, but led to the ASEAN Charter. And the big question today in the security area, the question of sovereignty and involvement in other political arena, question of non-interference. So all these questions are overlapping the other dimensions, and I think they're quite important. And now we have to go to the second paper. Again, just would like to remind you that we try to be very sensitive in the beginning, so people who are not familiar with the topic, but then it can be more complex, like if you're talking to peers, because it's recorded. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, but you do have your papers in the prospect of proceedings or a book. So it's important. So the next speaker is Miss Dr. Edjou Kantiébo. Yes, the second one, normally.
Non, moi je fais la dernière.
You want to be the last one? Okay. So
No,
then,
no, no.
So then it's your turn. Your yes, your paper is already here. So it's Miss Roswita.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Roswita. I'm from North Maluku. And political work organization. I'm interested in cross-border migration and migrant work. And actually, my paper is about the border control and the case for migrants' rights in Southeast Asia.
Speak louder, please.
Alright, this is Indonesian archipelago. This is where I live in a small cave island, in form of cave island. From the upper of North Maluku, Philippines, we have like problem when people from Philippines coming to North Maluku without documentation, or because they are mostly fishermen, and they can like illegally without the documentation, and sometimes they have bring problem to our local government, and sometimes they should be brought to detention because of they have no paper and no passport, and something like that. Yeah, the outlines of my paper would be cross-border movement pattern in Southeast Asia countries, and state's role in controlling the cross-border movement, and migrant workers' rights. My paper also explains about the trend of border migration in Asia and Southeast Asia. And destination countries within Southeast Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Brunei Darussalam, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Arab and the Middle East. The relationship of this topic with this conference, I thought that Asian and Africa, we share the same experience about migration. Since before 19th century, most people from East Africa already migrated throughout the world. And up until the 19th century, the growing tendency of people from African and Asian becoming more and more interested in migrate everywhere. Also, the focus of the discussion, because we have a link of Southeast Asian countries and African states. I also explained that migration is the biggest contribution to the global economy, especially the war, in this case, the Asia and Africa. The significant contributor of migrant workers globally is from Southeast Asia. And what I put the significant contributor to the migration is Philippines, and followed by Indonesia and Philippines. 10,455,788 people, and for Indonesia it's for 6 million, and it's accounted for 74% women working in the domestic sectors.
So, sorry,
Yes.
you mean 75% of all of them?
Yes, 75% domestic work. Right. About the roles in border controlling, because I put it, there are two views from egalitarian perspective and utilitarian, that's for human rights to go everywhere, and for equality and opportunity. Migration will contribute to a reduction of political, social, and economic inequalities. And by this, the equal rights of people should be prioritized. But for utilitarian vision, they see that the equal rights should not be enforced because there is no single entity of in which we can call it the collective will of people in the world that will confirm that rights, because the government between the region, every region or every state has their own responsibility, have their own rule to govern their border. To bring in people or to let them go, it's the rights of the government. This is the 2010 statistical data on Asian countries migrant. Actually, first since 1995, Malaysia also become the country where they send their people abroad to work, and but then later in 2005, they become the destination countries where people from other Southeast Asia countries go or seek for work there in Malaysia. This is the country profile of labor migration, and this data taken from the Red Cross President Manila Conference on labor migration in 2015, just recently. The receiving country and the number of award, and by year of since 2012 up to recently, most migrant workers actually they work in a very low level of education of people, so a low skill job. This is the statistic on labor migration. International migrant worldwide in world statistics in 2013, women accounted for 48% of total people migrant. And domestic workers, women accounted 82%, in which only 18% of men work in the domestic sector, in which it is unskilled or low level qualification or low level job. This one is the representation of migrant work in Asia in 2013, where in Asia, women accounted for 42% and men accounted for 58%. The number of migrant workers is since 2000 to 2013, 200 million and 214 million, and by 2013 it increased to 232 million. What is interesting in my paper is that I also put the government, how do the government should work to find out the problem that migrant workers should facing, like they have they have not been acknowledged in their working place. Yeah, so a lot of work have to be done. Like might have to acknowledge their migrant workers' right. Especially in Indonesia, there has been a campaign, and also a lot of people, a lot of communities, and a lot of activists assisting in making this demand become real. And this is what some of the demand that of Indonesian migrant. One of the demand is also they asked about to ratify the international the convention number 90 about the protection of migrants and their families. This is one of the demand. Yeah, and this is also the issues in Southeast Asian countries. For example, in Myanmar, they have problem in like for the documentation of their passport and so forth. This is a case when one of the migrants from Indonesia, he became the witness that he said that I went abroad in 1993, but she just only 13. But the agency helped her to make a document to changing her age to 32. So this is just to bring the access to become one of the number migrants. She actually worked in 9 years in the United Arab Emirates. She experienced very well, being treated very well, and every 3 years she was given a month leave. Also, she also can go back home. But when she went back to United Arab Emirates in 2002, she was stationed in Mecca. But it's like she doesn't have a day off, and torture, being beaten, and she decided lastly to run out from the place, but in a very bad condition. So she also became one of the people that needed the acknowledgement from the government to ratify the convention. So this is the convention, July 1st. Only 2 members, but now it's about 41 and 42 countries have ratified the convention. Now I will come to the solution and recommendation from my paper is that it must be a tripartite collaboration from the local government, between Southeast Asian country, private sector, international organizations, and ILO, UNESCO, and to formulate a framework and council to enforce the convention of global migrants' rights and to be acknowledged as well as endorsed by global society and international level, and to put into effect the convention of protection of migrant rights in collaboration with the migrant sending and receiving countries in Asia, Africa, and America. Okay, that's all my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roswita. I think this is a very heated topic, as you may see, not just in Europe. And despite of major contribution to world economy, this issue of migration is downplayed. She focused on the regional migration and the so-called illegal workers migrants, mainly women domestic work. She insisted on the border controlling approaches and government policies, and also on the advocacy for respecting the international covenants for labor migrants' rights and protection. Now, the floor is to Ms. Edjou, who will work on the issue of the sovereignty. Do we have signal?
Yes.
This is your own because. And the topic is, are the African countries really independent as preconized by the 1945 55th Bandung Conference?
Okay. My name Rosalie Edjou Kantiébo. I am anthropologist and then I come from Burkina Faso. I came to this conference with one communication Are the African countries really independent as preconized the Bandung Conference? Commerce, colonies, autonomy, is it a reality in Africa? I want to speak in French and be translated, but my translation is not there. Donc I try to speak English, but pardon, my English is not very good, but I think you understand me and you read on the board.
Can you make the writing bigger? No.
Too late, no, too late.
Goed zo. On a pas le temps.
J'ai pas compris. On est en retard.
Ça peut être plus grand, mais
Ah non, c'est trop tard. C'est impossible. It could be easy to realize an overview of the imperialist and colonialist action, but are still applied, particularly among Francophone Africa. France, since her colonialist settlement in Africa and anywhere else, keep maintaining a partnership relation with African states. Her former colonies, so-called independent since the 60s, and this partnership is done from an imperialist way. Major point of this French neo-colonialist policy are seen in upkeeping of military bases, colonial treaties of countries' vast exploitation are still implemented. Diplomatic relations with other countries are distorted because of the predominant interference of France in the same country's internal affairs. In Francophone Africa, the currency issue is still upsetting as it is tracked into the neo-colonial framework. The question of the military bases. The military issues from Serval to Balkan, French strength is military might in Africa. Balkan follow over military intervention, Serval, Mali, Epervier, Tchad, with 3,000 soldiers. Maybe it is in French, I try to explain you, but in English I cannot try. The film African Go Home, realized by Aziz goes beyond the military presence of France by inquiring on the military presence of the US, the aim of one of whom is world hegemony through military expertise. It goes without saying that in such operator, it is only the status quo preserving the interests of the Western power. The benefit of the population of the South is not the objective. They are only used as shells, cover as objects, not a subject. I don't know if you understand my explanation. It is a document informative. But this, if you want to know more, you can read Le militarisme français en Afrique of Robin Luckman. I have a paper here, but it is very long. I don't speak for. But I want to show you one paper. Je ne sais pas pourquoi je vais faire pour sortir parce que je veux faire passer. J'ai pas le temps. Bon, ensuite, we pass to colonial treaties of countries' bases exploitation are still employed. Neo-colonialism in Côte d'Ivoire,
Ivory Coast.
Ivory Coast. If you want to know more, there is a paper of Fanny Pajot in this. she explained why French destroy Ivory Coast politique after Bayu. It is explained that Laurent Gbagbo is one who don't want colonialism form in Côte d'Ivoire. And French may work with military system to destroy Gbagbo work. And now he is in the prison. C'est ça? Prison? After diplomacy in Africa, diplomatic relations with other countries are disturbed because of the predominant interference of French in the same countries and international affairs. Neocolonialism in Côte d'Ivoire, okay, c'est déjà fait. The currency issue in Africa. Africa have a real problem with currency. We have not our currency and la monnaie. Money, voilà. Donc it is a real problem for us in Africa, and I think Indonesia can show a little how to be delivered. Bon, c'est bon. La conclusion. The input of this Bandung spirit is to highlight the status quo between colonial policies obvious or not enough south, bilateral and multilateral relations. Contradictory statement. The same rule announced in the Berlin Conference split on Africa are still submitting southern population to full political will of Western leaders. I invite you to debunk the pattern based on opportunistic interest and pledge that Bandung spirit helps transform them. It will be hard, but our common analysis speed afterwards will allow a better world.
Good morning to all. I am Professor Nisar-ul-Haq. I am teaching in the Department of Political Science, Jamia Millia Islamia. It's a central university in India, New Delhi. Yeah. And it is my topic today is regional cooperation in South Asia, challenges in the globalized world. If you take it that what is South Asia and how the countries are coming into with the Bandung spirit, you would find South Asia presents an intriguing paradox, for it is a region of great radical diversity with innumerable cultures, languages and religions. Yet as a region it has a distinctive and unmistakable identity. Historically, the countries of the region have experienced similar, if not identical, processes of historical evolution. The South Asian nations not only share a common history, they also belong to a common civilization pattern. Thus, South Asia is a distinct civilizational entity bound together by shared languages, religions, culture, ethnicity, historical memories, and development predicament. The purpose of my paper is to investigate the regional organization, which is called as South Asian Regional Organization. It faces several obstacles and problems. It is covering the areas such as security, political economy, trade, industry, and operating at the level of both foreign policy and domestic politics of identities, images, norms, etc. Indian position in South Asia, both geographically central and share a common border with overwhelming dominant in the area. Population, economy, strong military are leading to asymmetric power relation in South Asian region. Regional context. South Asia is also a least integrated region compared to other regional organizations. The most important thing is to promote cooperation in a way that create incentives without fear of being dominated or losing one's autonomy for a smaller state. So Indian policy or approach towards the region based on this principle, which can help to create more cooperative atmosphere in the region. In order to overtake political dispute and tension among the countries, need a strategic role for India as a regional power. Robert Cohen and Joseph Nee argue that stable economic regimes require the leadership that can modify to apply in regional economic cooperation in South Asian regional context. This paper is divided into 4 parts. Firstly, it will try to conceptualize the unique feature of South Asian regional cooperation with compared to other regional organizations. Secondly, it will analyze to how the Indian role and position impact on South Asian regional cooperation. Thirdly, it will address the question, what are the possibilities and necessity of greater cooperation in South Asian region? And finally, it will try to answer the question, why the cohesive strategy necessary for the effective South Asian regional organization. Researchers have different concerns and preferences, various interests and values that influence their research enterprises. The variability of values, however, does not destroy the requirement of formal consistency and the empirical validity of political analysis. It is true that in the absence of clear grasp of analytical framework, much of the political theory degenerates into meaningless facts. The study of regional integration is concerned with explaining how and why a state ceases to be wholly sovereign. How and why they voluntarily mingle, merge and mix with their neighbor so as to lose the factual attribute of sovereignty while acquiring new techniques for resolving conflicts between themselves. Regional cooperation, organization, system and subsystem may help to describe steps along the way, but they should not be confused with the resulting condition as Haas has pointed out. The formation of SAARC, which is South Asian Regional Cooperation, in 1985 represented a major diplomatic initiative by South Asian leaders, but SAARC has experienced limited growth in terms of institutional development and program implementation. The regional cooperation agreement among developing countries can exist on a specific issue area such as trade, monetary, exchange, security, social welfare, science and technology, meteorology and other areas. The choice of issue areas for cooperation, the nature and terms of cooperation depend on the participating member countries, domestic politics and leadership preferences, so on and so forth. South Asian countries share common rivers, mountains, system, ocean and ecological cycles. 8 of the South Asian countries, now earlier it was 7, now 8 of the South Asian countries share a common colonial past, historical ties, religious and cultural tradition, linguistic affinities and values and social norms. South Asian region is Indo-centric. India is the center of South Asian system, sharing the frontier with every country in the region. All the SAARC countries share border with India. None of them share border with one another except Pakistan and Afghanistan. More than half of the world's poor live in this particular region. All the South Asian countries have experienced high population growth rate during the past 4 decades. South Asian countries do not share a common external threat perception, which make the difficult leaders of these countries to work towards common regional security strategies. The structural imbalance between India and Pakistan and other smaller states has created contradicting policies, objective related small population, small size population, economic underdevelopment and geographical location. The smaller states in South Asia cannot hope to exert much influence in the South Asian regional system. The level of economic integration in South Asia is very low, partly because groups of low-income, labor-intensive economies are largely competitive rather than complementary. India-Pakistan trades had remained at a very low level since 2004. India-Pakistan government had meets and agreed to promote economic cooperation along with scheduled tasks on all issues. In 1998, India and Sri Lanka signed free trade agreement effective in 2000. India has unilaterally reduced duties to zero for import free to the 4 least developed countries such as Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal and Bangladesh, subjected to a negative list of items which can be imported at SAFTA rate. Only with 2 countries, Nepal and Sri Lanka, India has bilateral trade agreement, Bhutan, and whatever see 2 possibilities paths for South Asian regional security complex. India need to be moving predominantly from the unilateral and hard power approaches towards the South Asian region to multilateral and soft power approaches. South Asia is one of the world's most ethnically and linguistically complex region. Ethnic political mobilization marked features of their historic and nation-building experiences. India is the largest state in terms of size, population, natural resources and market, but there is no consensus among the South Asian countries to recognize India as the region's undisputed leader. Contested leadership with SAARC has at least 2 negative implications for regional cooperation. First, there is no paymaster or no regional leader to ease distribution problem. Second, and the absence of regional leader make coordination of rules, regulation and policies extremely difficult and time consuming. India enjoys an absolute comparative advantage in almost every sphere despite Pakistan challenges to India's leadership, overwhelming economic and political influence. India is clear that India is the natural leader in the South Asia. Lack of consensus among the smaller countries of South Asia on Indian leadership is based on their fear of hegemonic arrogance, potential expansionism and fear of dominance. A country's soft power is enhanced with its images are seen as positive and its policies are considered as legitimate in the eyes of the others. India was the first country to respond to Sri Lanka's request for assistance in the tsunami in December 2004. India assisted in the cleanup of a major oil spill in February 2006 and the evacuation of Sri Lankan national from Lebanon in July 2006. India has political, economic and cultural relations with Nepal and also support for new democratic reality. India's largest democracy, it has the potential as a regional democratic power and to promote free market democracy. Regional cooperation in South Asia would be more important in areas such as natural disaster, destruction of economic system, pollution, drought, irrigation, fishing, transportation, water sharing, hydroelectricity generation, and energy issues. Cooperation can be effective through the increasing trust between countries and embedding the issues in wider negotiation. In this age of global integration, prosperity can only be achieved by international cooperation, at least the type of prosperity that is inclusive and sustainable. We know that we cannot deal with many big problems on our own because these challenges often cross borders and because the cost cannot be borne by any one country on its own. While there has been a proliferation of global multilateral conferences, as record pointed out, there has also been a mushrooming of a different kind of forum that is plurilateral in nature. Such forms should not be perceived as a fragmentation of the multilateral system. They cannot create valuable opportunities to form consensus among smaller like-minded groups on specific issues which can be taken into the broader multilateral form. And with the conclusion, I would say that if the South Asian countries, the 8 nations together, they unite themselves, I think they can contribute to the welfare of the entire region and for the welfare of the entire people of the South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and good day. And just time for me to present some various about your listeners more people in West Papua. So, first time, Conference of Asia and Africa is a big dream where this in our supremacy in the build of the freedom for Asia and Africa. So Papua is known as originally is developed town the nature of the church missionaries in 1855 auto and Geisler arrived in Manzna and prayed in the name of God. We tread this ground. Such a prayer is regarded as the oldest prayer of the Papuans in the development of civilization that is used as the word of the doctrine of Papua nationalism. The love for Papua becomes stronger at the time of intimidation. Edjou married by Burkina is Samuel Kane. While other nations have intelligence and great wisdom, this nation will rise up to rid themselves. Then sending our missionary figure continue to educate the Papuans with the materials insightful of Papua Bay. It was just an empty educate, but educational materials such as books and the songs were created and used. One of the Papuans' national songs created by missionaries dominated Samuel Kane, On My Land, Papua, was used at the national anthem of Papua in the book initially Golden Flight. After that, in 1962, the Dutch East Indies government led a foundation for the National of Papua. He was built by the patriotism of Papua nationalism for their nation. Free Papua Organization (OPM) in Indonesia was established with the symbols and the state doctrine taken from the Sendeling missionaries concept. By the way, here we clearly see that in the 1855, the Papuan nationalism was born, and the first, long before 1969. It was only that after that Indonesia started in the Indonesia education into nationalism Papua. I don't know that that year Indonesia nationalism in the land of the Kasuari actually was born or was not born, because due to the presence of Indonesia in the Euros 1962 and until 1969, the Papuan people put up their resistance to reject the presence of Indonesia in the land of the Kasuaris. The term separatist, from the Indonesia say, eventually emerged and attached to the Free Papua Organization (OPM). The formation of a Papuan state is the real nationalism embrace. Indonesian national revolution was conducted by the Engineer Soekarno in 1962 with the Arena Operation Commando to disperse the Dutch medical state in the mainland West New Guinea. Is the initial one with of the hatred Papua to the Indonesia, as well as a fertilizer with the fertilized Papua nationalism toward the nation. Genocide against the Papua is the beginning of the feeling certain that distinguishes the people of Papua and Indonesia. So often Papuans say that we are Melanesia different from the Malay race. Racial differences are when people of Papua were not treated well, killed and neglected. The discrimination against even the state approach in Papua, which used military and led up in the murder and massacre the life of Papuans, which increasingly become as a capital that incites hatred against Indonesia and stimulates the Papuan spirit of love for Papua itself. Furthermore, the Pepera event was considered a failure by the Papuans because it was not in accordance with the instruction of the United Nations. Then one man, one vote, one person, one vote was not carried out them. It was because Indonesia did repression against the people of Papua, and also Indonesia just took every safe cadet representing the Papuans of each tribe in Papua to conduct election referendum along Pepera using two questions. One, follow Indonesia, or two, independence itself. But question had their own consequences. If answer follow Indonesia, for sure, wildlife. If answer independence, will be so died insanely. The method used by Indonesia was to support the psychology by showing some pressure with their beautiful women, and also there was the promise of the state that will give special position the state of Indonesia and others. Cross marriage between Indonesians and the Papuans, which gave birth to the dual nationalism of the people of Papua, which I say. The relevance of Papuans' dual nationalism occurred as a result of cross marriage between Indonesian nationalism and the Papua nationalism, of which both comes down from the base of its conception of ideology, namely Indonesia with her ideologies and Papua with hers, sorting out the core issues of the dynamic of Papua, observable from several aspects: the historical, ideological, and political. It boils down to one point, namely nationalism, Papua nationalism and Indonesian nationalism. The problem of the Papua being and the Indonesian-ness become the base of the dynamic that gave birth to the Papuan upheld to this day. The emergence of two nationalisms in Papua, the Papua nationalism and the Indonesian nationalism, that situation is a dilemma in understanding the history of Papua as a part of the Unitary Republic of Indonesia. Therefore, this paper seeks to answer the general question: are the generalization about the nationalism which has led to the reading of the history of Indonesia. Nationalism, Indonesia not contrary to the historical past in Papua. From the proclamation of independence on 17 August 1945, Indonesia inherited the Dutch East Indies in a meeting of the preparatory Committee for Indonesia Independence (PPKI) on 18 August 1945. It was the state that Indonesia inherited the Dutch East Indies. The main territory covers Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, West Nusa Tenggara, East Nusa Tenggara, and the Moluccas. At this time, Papua was part of the Moluccas province. Papua has a different historical experience with other regions. This difference is characterized by the prevalence of the Netherlands in Papua until 1962. That is why
The development of Indonesia national in this province is of a different way. This difference began to be seen since the settling process of Papua nationalism in 1855 and Indonesian nationalism in 1945 on Papuan earth. As a result of Indonesia boundary restriction based on the farmer, Netherlands as India's generalization in the history of Indonesia were often made. So many generalizations were made based on the level of national historical revolution and some experience of the leaders of the Republic of Indonesia in the central government, which created in the imbalanced picture of the revolution experience. Generalization frequently done by scholars cannot be applied to the whole of the Indonesia. Indeed, it must be admitted that Indonesia is a one nation from Sabang to Merauke, but it shall also be recognized that opinion on that the rise of nationalism in Indonesia varies from one region to another. In conclusion, from the context of this paper, we discover aspect of the four maintenance of one nationalism and also dual nationalism that have grown up in Papua, namely, 1. The formation of Papua nationalism is a race where Papuans have realized that they are of the Melanesian race, black skin and curly hair, different from Indonesia, which is of the Malay race, whose skin is brown and the hair is straight. Second point is tribal Papuans recognize their tribal and are only different by language, but united as one race, which is Melanesian because of having curly hair and a black skin. In the next geography, Papua is sprawled as island that is located at the eastern and is not included in the territory of Indonesia. History in the process of the stabilization of the state of Indonesia, Papua was not involved in it and held a record of its own history. The proof is when Indonesia gained independence in the 1945, Papua was still part of the Dutch East Indies until 1962. Only then occurred the seizure of Papua between Indonesia and the Netherlands. Indonesian nationalism in Papua is the settling of Indonesian strong Indonesian official figure who were sent by the Netherlands to Papua, and at the time of paper were most chief declared openly willing to join Indonesia and formed their red and white from in the land of the Cendrawasih or the birds of paradise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sagrim. Thank you. This is quite interesting because it's the whole history of the Papua nationhood. The issue of Papua nationalism may not necessarily distinct from the Malay civilization. We have to remember that it is one race, the human race, but it's important here to distinguish because as we're going to see with the Palestinian question, the question of sovereignty here is still also a very heated debate. Genocides, massacres, and lawful acts against the Papuan citizenry. The issue of dual nationalism and assimilation policy in the Makuku province. The question that is still open, whether we are heading to more autonomy or a nation state, is not clear because it's not just a question of recognizing the identity, which is quite obvious and genetically organized. The question is, do you guys want a nation state or you want to be integrated into the country? All right, so I hope we'll have a chance for that. And I have asked special guests because in the region, the weight of China is quite important. We just had yesterday the Indian African Summit, and India is competing with China. The dynamism of these two BRICS countries is certainly going to change the globalization image. For sure, the trade, United States, Japan, and Europe is now competing. And for the 21st century, this is certainly a balance of power shifting. But the nature of China is not necessarily also based on the stereotypes, and I think the merit of Lau Kin-Chi's work is to show what is behind the screen, other things that are not necessarily interpreted in a good way. And she had a TIC research they have released already in its Global University project. For those of you who are not familiar, it's a very interesting project, and I pledge for you to contribute. It has an open source academic knowledge, and we don't have time to elaborate on that, but I ask her to focus a little on key points, so we'll have the opportunity to have this, and then we will also have the second thing, that is the failure of the non-aligned movement, addressing the question of the Palestinian issue. This flag was raised in the UN system, but we still have a lot of duties and a lot of problems, and we want to raise that also. So, Lau Kin-Chi, please.
Thank you for asking me to come to this panel. I'll be very brief. Okay. Yes. Well, you hear that the 21st century, there's a new term called Chinamerica, as if China and the United States could could be on equal par. But then this term is actually very deceptive, because if we look at China in comparison to the United States, what China lacks is the military power that sustains the hegemony of the US dollars and of US politics around the world. So we see that China has been working very hard, especially for Chinese capital, to try to support certain regimes in order to, in exchange for certain trade agreements or etc. And yet, for example, it supported Sudan, and then there will be coups, there will be unsettlings of the regimes, and we find that all the previous efforts that the Chinese state has put in would just go void. And so we see that in fact the technology ban on China is still in force in many places, and China does not really have that high technology. So the Chinese president just recently went to the United States and bought a huge amount of Boeing airplanes. And he goes somewhere and then he buys the high technology items, which also tells you that the kind of technology that China has, maybe it can send some satellites, it can do certain things, but if you compare that to the United States, it is still very inferior. But China has been working on regional integration, and so we have had a few years ago the important China, Korea, Japan trade agreement, which was an attempt to go for regional integration. But that was also frustrated when the US supported Japanese politicians started the disputes over the Diaoyutai Islands. So the territorial disputes then somehow caused the regional integration attempts to go abroad. And there was the idea of the BRICS Bank, which was also to try to foster an alternative power, economic, financial bank, alternative somehow to the IMF or the World Bank. But from WikiLeaks, we learned that the CIA was bugging the German chancellor's telephones and emails, and Germany had been interested in supporting the BRICS Bank, but the United States also came in, and that is somehow became frustrated. So now China is going on the new project of New Silk Road for land integration, partly of course for its own benefit, because it is now so dependent on energy and on the maritime routes, which are very vulnerable. And so China is working for the integration of the New Silk Road, but we also can see the huge difficulties, because at any point for the Silk Road, it could be stopped, it could be sabotaged. So what I'm trying to say is that although there's a lot of propaganda about China's ambition, about China's flexing its muscle in different places, we can see that we can also see the ambitions, but also the major limitations and constraints on China at this time. The second part is I'd like to also see how we can locate China in the global scene. People always say China is the second largest economy in the world today, but if we look at the structure of such an economy, we find that it is still basically a world factory, and since the profit from the manufacturing sector is becoming so low, they are non-profitable. And now a lot of the manufacturing industries depend on government subsidies on export. So they are actually not earning anything from the manufacturing itself, it's trying to take the government subsidy. So China has been using its kind of currency strategy, buying up, and that is a huge foreign reserve of US dollars 3.8 trillion. And majority of that is in US dollars. And yet China, how did China get all these foreign reserves? Is by selling the manufactured goods at a very, very cheap price. But then with the money that is brought in, it buys a lot of US government bonds. And so in two ways, it's a double contribution to the US economy at the expense of China's own strength. And we also see that China is not also exporting water through the export of vegetables and apples and oranges. China's per capita access to fresh water is only 1/4 of the world average. So it is a very scarce resource for Chinese, and yet now China produces 67% of the world's vegetables, 50% of the apples, 40% of the oranges, which they are exporting to Russia, to different places. And so through the export of such vegetables and agricultural products, China is actually also exporting its scarce water resources. So we see that in China now, when we talk about sovereignty, of course, then you need to have the political and economic sovereignty, and yet the way China locates itself in the world global economy is very disadvantageous and cannot be sustained for long. And if we look at the Chinese economy in detail, we find that a lot of brands which appear to have a Chinese brand are actually owned by multinationals. Monsanto and many of the multinationals, they actually own a lot in China. So I think some 8 or 10 years ago, I think you have heard about the milk powder problem. And it's only when there was this problem that came out that we found out that that company was actually owned mostly by New Zealand dairy company. And China's soybeans, etc., edible oil, the processing, etc., they are already all in multinational hands. So these are the problems that we have to look at and see in what ways China has been integrated for about 30 years into the global economy, and in which ways it has benefited or it has suffered at a loss. As for the problems, then the ecological problems are now a major challenge for China, not only about the water resources, but also about, for example, the energy demand. So, for example, China is building so many of the nuclear power plants with French, with other technology. And yet, they are always a major, it's like placing a bomb in your own backyard. And we also see that there is the need for food security, for livelihood-related issues, and on these, then China still retains some of the advantages because the land, rural land, still belong to the small peasants. They can be used by the small peasants, and yet there are now changes to, in the name of facilitating the circulation of use of right of usage of rural land. Then they actually the land can also now be mortgaged. So we see such changes, and in China, of course, then the government has always said that it is Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics. And Sam Yang-min, 2 weeks ago in Beijing, we were together in the seminar, he was saying that with such middle class kind of rhetoric, etc., how far is it Chinese characteristics or is it American characteristics? So we see the rhetoric, culture being dominated by middle class perspectives, and of course there's about 20% of the Chinese becoming middle class, and yet we have to go beyond such rhetoric or such discourses to see the problems and these positions of the subaltern classes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee Kiu Chi, for taking the time on your ecology seminar to join us. This is such an important issue, whether this market socialism has more market than socialism is more and more obvious. And the external effects, as you mentioned, are tremendous. For this Bandung spirit, it is a great lesson because in one way, China catch up and managed to master accumulation. But today we have erosion of those sovereignty spaces, and I look forward to read this study, very, very important contribution. But last but not least, this Palestinian question, Your Excellency and Doctor, if you want to please update us. I think we will let Her Excellency wrap it with the concluding the remarks. But
first, can I make just 2 comments about the last?
No, we will do this.
No, not 2 comments, just.
But we want to do this as a discussion on the papers at the plenary. But now we just focus on this Palestine.
What we want from
political. It's a political seminar, so we want to address just political issues. What are the clear demands that you guys want to make sure that this seminar take in account on the Palestinian question?
What we want is actually Dr. Makram stated a little bit yesterday the idea of a research network that would be supported by the Bandung and that would fit in also with the Chinese global university perspective. This is the final aim and project that we would like to have for Palestine as a result of this Bandung Conference. Now there are, on the political level, of course, we want full support, which we have from many Asian and African countries, for the national liberation movement of Palestine. But I believe that education and research, in order to understand more, for everyone to understand more the problems and the question of Palestine, and for the Palestinians also to understand better the questions and the problems that are faced by the Afro-Asians. So we need to connect on a regular basis because I feel there is not much understanding by us and by others of each other's. This needs a long-term strategy, and it would be very beneficial to Palestine and to the Afro-Asian. And I leave to Makram to continue.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you.
In reality, there are a few facts perhaps that could clarify what is it that we are discussing. There are around 13 million Palestinians. Half of them live in historical Palestine, and half of them are refugees. Those who are refugees are scattered across the globe, and those who live in Palestine, one-third live in the Gaza Strip, which is the largest open-air prison. Literally, this is not propaganda. You cannot actually go out and in the Gaza Strip if you are a citizen of the Gaza Strip. It's a very small strip of land which people cannot merely go out of it. And it's been going on for many years, and in particular since the last 10 years. And you've got the other third, which is in the West Bank, which is from Jerusalem eastwards. And there, Israel and the former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon laid the biggest, the largest wall in history, which separates two parts of historical Palestine, the 67 and the 48. So people, Palestinians, cannot move. And I was recently in Palestine, if you travel, say, from the sea, from where I live, in Jaffa, and you go eastwards, half an hour, all of a sudden you are faced by a tall and long concrete wall which absolutely crosses lands, farms, cities, towns, and houses. Some of the houses, the garden is here, the house is here, a part of the house belongs to this side and part of this side. It affects education, economy, agriculture, movement, entertainment, religion, etc. So there is this restriction on the Palestinian population in Palestine. Those who are in the West Bank cannot move to the western side. Those who are in Gaza cannot go out. So practically,
and the refugees cannot go.
And of course, refugees outside cannot go to Palestine. So Israel has kicked out half of the Palestinians, and the other half is completely, physically, logistically in prison. Now, this, nobody can debate this, nobody can say no. It's not that we are inventing this. This is the situation on the ground, and Israel is not denying it. Now, it's affecting economy, it's affecting the education. And just try to be a psychologist or a sociologist and ask, what state of mind can any even youngster have if he is imprisoned, he cannot walk, he cannot communicate properly, he cannot practice in everyday life? What sort of psychological impact does this have on anyone? So clearly, frustration comes up, and after frustration comes violence. It's very normal, although we would have liked it to be peaceful, but clearly it can't be all that easy. Now, the economic occupation is quite heavy. because it's stifling the growth of Palestinian economy. And therefore, as a peaceful measure, what the Palestinian side and the international solidarity movement that supports Palestine is suggesting, they are saying, okay, you don't want us to respond by using force, physical force or force by using tools or stones. Fine, let's have a popular, peaceful resistance. So they go and they demonstrate, but then the Israeli army come and they crush, injure and kill. And even recently they have actually literally using their hands, they killed a Palestinian MP. And then they say, okay, you can't do anything, and then we talk to the world, including this conference, please can you help us, not by providing arms, not by providing soldiers, can you help us practice boycott, economic boycott against Israel, economic, cultural, academic against Israel, so that at least there is this tool of pressure against the practices of Israel, so that they feel the heat of the pressure and they give up a little bit and they come to peaceful solution. To remind you, in 1948, the Palestinian people suffered the catastrophe, the Nakba. 80% of the Palestinians were either driven, expelled, massacred, or just ran away for their lives. What happened is that after 20 years of struggle, Israel occupied the second part in 1967. So the first part was occupied, then the second part was occupied. So the
first part is called in international Israel proper.
Yes.
It's Israel improper.
Actually, what we want to know now, because this flag was arisen, is the question of viability of the state. This is the
exactly. I'm coming to this.
We're running out of time.
Sure.
So
I'm coming to this.
Yes.
I'm coming from what I'm saying is that all these two parts of Palestine are actually occupied. The UN recognized the so-called Israel on the borders of 48, but then it's occupying the 67. But now that the Palestinians have accepted to have a smaller state, giving up nearly 70% of historical Palestine, Israel even doesn't want to give the Palestinian a state on even not 13% of historical Palestine. So actually from 100%, the Palestinian territory and population are shrinking, and Israel is not accepting. There was on the table the two-state solution, but Israel came, and de facto, if you visit Palestine today, you cannot have two-state solution, because although Israel drew this wall, eastwards of the wall, i.e. in the West Bank, there are nearly 700,000 settlers. So in other words, assuming Israel at some point will say, okay, we are for the two-state solutions, what will be doing with all these settlements and with nearly 750,000 settlers in the Palestinian land of the so-called Palestinian state? And therefore now, people are coming back, okay, if you can't support the two-state solution as international community, and if you can't force Israel to allow a Palestinian state on a very small piece of territory, then let's have a one-state solution where everybody can live there. It will be a one secular democratic state where Jews and Arabs can live. But of course, Israel is not accepting this. So Israel is not accepting this. Israel is not implementing that. In the UN, we are achieving small steps, but frankly, even China, where is our Chinese friend? Even China, who used to be a grand supporter of Palestine, still is. China is opening up its economy and collaborating with Israel financially. There is at least 1,000 Israeli startups in China. There's a lot of trade with China. There is a lot of trade with India. Even, okay, only the private sector, but even in Indonesia, there is trade, and the annual trade reached $120 million. So what we're saying that the moral support, Mr. Chairman, that we are getting is good, is great. We are happy about it. And we will, of course, ask for more. The more is using the economic stick in order to ask Israel to implement nearly 70 UN resolutions that Israel has been ignoring. So we would like the international community, just to conclude, to practice pressure via economic sanctions, mainly to stop trading and to stop any collaboration on every possible front in order to bring Israel to drink a peaceful water and clean water, so that at least both sides can live together. Because now it's not that the Palestinians want to drive out the Israelis from Palestine, it's actually the Palestinians who are begging not to be driven and killed from their country. Thank you.
Sorry for coming late. I make a presentation. It's not an achieved paper. It's more some remarks about the situation, because I don't know if you know Burkina Faso. It's a country in West Africa, which has its independence in 1960, and quite a really interesting story. And I wanted to reflect on this story, and Aziz, I'm really glad to make that review, because maybe our debate can have really an impact in this country. Why? Because the global picture of African countries is that authoritarianism prevails. In North Africa, though, we have Arab Spring. You know that there are some setbacks. Maybe only Tunisia is in Egypt, and Morocco or Egypt, Libya, the situation is chaotic. And in the rest of Africa, we have, particularly in French Africa, presidents that are still in power after 20, 25 years. So it's really a situation that I would like to debate with you and try to find some lessons. Lessons particularly for the history of Burkina Faso. Because these people of Burkina Faso are one of the rare people in Africa that are really struggling for their freedom, and that is important. And I want to make first an historical update of this. 100 years ago, at this was, I think, November 1950, peasants and people from, it was not a colony, because the colony was created in 1919. It doesn't work. The connection is not really good. So, 100 years ago, there was an anti-colonial war in Upper Volta. And this historical moment, this historical event is not well known. We know that in the 20th century, we know the struggles of the Portuguese speaking countries, we know that. But we don't know that in Upper Volta, peasants, hunters, and ordinary men stand up in 1915, thank you Natalie, to challenge the colonial force in Upper Volta. So I will come to that after. These are the. This is one of the writers from Burkina Faso, called Nazi Boni, who has written about it in his book, The Crépuscule des Temps Anciens, about this event. He has made it in a literary way, but it is a testimony that only some European historians have studied. And even the historians from Burkina Faso or in Africa have not studied and published in French. So we are 100 years after this. But this was a first manifestation of the will of the people of Burkina Faso to challenge the authority and obtain their freedom. So the historian Madjie Saoul and Patrick Royer, who wrote West African Challenge to Empire, Culture and History in the Colonial Volta Bani Anti-Colonial War, have published an important book on it. And I want to just quote one of their sentences in the introduction. In the final month of 1915, the prominent residents of 11 villages in the Volta region of French West Africa gathered around a shrine to take an oath and declare war on the colonial administration. Thus started the Volta Bani War, one of the last and bloodiest confrontations of the colonial occupation of West Africa. So this is, it's not only in Volta in Africa that the war is challenged, but this was one of the most important. And this writer, Nazi Boni, who died sadly too young, has written about that in his
You don't have a map?
Oh, I don't, but if there is a maker, I will. No, there's no. Ok.
Essayez d'aller plutôt aux événements récents.
Ok, ok. Je vais pas aller trop.
Oui, parce que
Là,
la phase
c'est 10
est vraiment
minutes, hein.
sur le.
Ouais, ouais.
Il y reste déjà. Essayez de revenir aux
Il
événements.
me reste combien?
Ben, en fait,
2 minutes.
oui, c'est ça. Essayez de venir aux derniers événements.
D'accord, d'accord. So, you know, 1 year ago, in at this same moment, the end of October, I was in I make how to say, a jump from 1915 to 2015, 100 years. Last year, at this same time, the 29th of October or 30th of October, I was in Ouagadougou, which is the capital city of Burkina Faso and also the capital of cinema in Burkina, in the continent, because we organized the Pan-African Film Festival in Ouagadougou. And I was in my hotel in a Jolly Hotel, a very nice name, Jolly, I think it's nice. And there was this in the town. Here is the National Assembly. The National Assembly is the expression of national sovereignty. It's the house of the people. And this is what the people of Burkina Faso have made in this National Assembly. The young people, the activists, the opposition to Blaise Compaoré, the former president, have sacked the National Assembly and burned it. And after doing that, they were moving to the presidential palace. And our hotel was near the presidential palace.
Say why?
Please. In Ouagadougou 2000, it is a district in the city. And they come and we were allowed to take our things, our bags, and go out, and it's really impressive. And this is you see the place of revolution, of national place in Ouagadougou, almost 1 million people. The young people, and here you have a message, bless, you must dégage, okay. So this is to show that popular sovereignty is an aspiration of African people. We are not wanting to obey to authoritarian regimes. But these regimes are supported by Western people. In our case, France are supported best compared because after the death of the big leader, Houphouët-Boigny, our country was used as the guardian of the interests of French imperialism in West Africa. But thanks to the education of our civil society, the trade unions, we have a political culture based on trade unions and the role of intellectuals. The youth of Burkina Faso has begun to understand, and also we have an important period, 1983 and to 87, a revolution with Thomas Sankara regime, which has left some seeds in the political culture. So for me, this is a good example, and I want, in my purpose that I will write, to analyze it with what I also have learned. We cannot say that all what is Western is bad. When I was in France as a student, I had the opportunity to attend the seminar of Tony Negri. Tony Negri is a radical philosopher from Italia, University of Padova, and who is thinking about all the anti-empire movements, the activists, the philosophy of activism, with his friend from Seattle University, Michael Hart. And they define the thinking of Tony Negri is based on the idea of the constituent power. Constituent power is more than popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignties challenge national sovereignty. We have seen the National Assembly, but constituent power is really the will of the people is taken into account and the people decides. So I think we can use with many other thinkers, the work of this philosopher to analyze the situation. So this is just an introduction.
Okay, I know this is not very fair for us to squeeze you in the corner and we have had some problem for your PowerPoint. We have little time left because we're supposed to wrap up and then go to lunch. We heard that lunch is about to be served very soon. This was about
the analysis of the labor, the cheap labor force-driven economy. This is quite an important critique of the situation. The second point would be our friend from Papua. Is he? Oh, sorry. I knew that you were talking about Papua and not Papua New Guinea. Now my question is, you're talking about nationalism. Am I right in thinking, or did I understand you properly, that you said that the emergence of the Papua nationalism was fostered by the church?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now, my just third, possibly question or comment, our Chinese colleague, it's not whether I agree or disagree, but having analyzed the presence of China in Africa, not only that we talk about Chin Africa or China Africa, but it would be slightly, possibly slightly not fully accurate to describe China's activities in Africa as fully on the moral side. Even if there are coups in Africa, and there are many unfortunately, and even if most of the regimes in Africa are either corrupt or dictatorships or both, they are still making, Chinese companies are still making hefty sums from running many mines, especially in particular, say in Sudan, where there are wars for tens of years, and Chinese companies are quite satisfied with their profits. So we are talking here about something which is ongoing. And the final comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman, would be just a little note. You said the population in Burkina Faso are in favor, of course, of democratic rule, etc., but they are supported by, and then you said, Western peoples. Now, I'm not sure, sorry, I know it's discourse, but it's very important in politics to get it right. I know from our experience, it's not, I'm sure you are talking about Western peoples, you are talking about Western multinationals, which are, and I'm sure you must have heard it in France by many analysts, which are, these companies are a state within a state.
African
that are running the colonial economic heritage in Africa and elsewhere.
I was saying African governments are supported, they can stay in power because they are supported by Western interests. So it was a
they're not the peoples necessarily.
Yeah.
No, we understood.
On the contrary.
We understood.
I have a question.
There was Lapton Chi before Your Excellency.
One thing I was just trying to look at the geopolitics of China in relation to the States. And of course we are also very critical about the kind of investments, the kind of activities of Chinese capital. But then I think the activities of capital has to be distinguished from the plight of the poor also in China, because China's poor still constitutes 12% of the world's poor. And the second point is in relation to Palestine. I think I haven't really heard in these days the question about the role of the United States in the post-war global strategies. So how can we talk about the question of Israel without referring to the U.S. strategy in the same way as Japan? Because the Japanese policies, especially its foreign policies, are very much also influenced by U.S. policies.
Thank you.
And just to complement the question for Your Excellency, we still don't understand the question of autonomy or independence or integration in Indonesia. What is it clearly?
Okay. Thank you.
Be brief.
Thank you for what Papua is still right now, and they are to fight for free nationalism, freedom, not for autonomy, especially autonomy. Yes.
So you want independence?
Yes. Still no.
But that was, I must say, was not really clear in your paper.
My paper presented about dual nationalism still in Papua right now. So, the next is my friend another voice to lead for fight for freedom. I'm just say it in the Papua is dual nationalism.
Okay, the other cameras were supposed to complete. Edjou, there is Your Excellency first.
It's a global question, or I think we should think about the relation between foreign policy and domestic politics. And I think that this question is related to the failure of regional politics because of many regional networks, even on I was for a year at the United Nations. You see nations sitting, discussing, but there are always underhanded things, which is the truth that is happening, whether concerning US related. For example, even the Bandung spirit was broken for someone with America, others with the Soviet Union. And these things are never discussed openly, because when you go as a state representative, you are lying all the time, you know. Things, the connection between, that's why I like also the Papua paper, because of this dual nationalism idea, not about Papua and Indonesia, but we have it also. We are Palestinians, but we are Arabs, Arabs, but we are Asian, but we are And these things are always, maybe that's why we need to think very seriously of the relation between domestic problems and how these are reflected in order to avoid the failure in the future of regional politics and not to see ourselves as nations only as the others see us, you know. I'm not here representing India because it's a great, but I know inside that there are many ethnies and problems and class struggle. Maybe this is for future reflection and your trans-international reflection in the South. We need to, there's a lot of work that has to be done to understand each other and to see how we can work for the avoidance of oppression, of subjugation, for the real sovereignty, for real fraternity, real liberation, not false aspects, you know, and images like Shakespeare's "the world is a stage and we are all actors."
Speaking of which, I will take the opportunity of having Dr. Paulina around because one of the key players is Russia. And we have spoken about China, India, but Russia is also discrete but playing an amazing role in the world scene. It's no longer Soviet Union, we are no longer so-called bipolar world. And I'm sure she has plenty of things to say, a little surprise, but I would appreciate her comment on this Bandung spirit and the role of Russia in the sub-region. I know you want to see the end of the Syria, to pronounce yourself, but you can still, I think, tell us a little on your side, please.
What I would like to say that Russia now tries to recuperate the lost positions. Because during these 20 years, Russia really lost this position in Central Asia, in former Soviet countries, socialist countries. Yes, it's true. And now, with the new politics, very pragmatical politics now in Russia. In the beginning, with Eltsin, this period was first, I don't want to qualify it, but Russia was oriented to the west. It depends from west politics, from Europe, United States. It was a Yeltsin period. Putin changed completely the orientation, political orientation, completely. Not completely, but during the first Putin era, Russia a multipolar politics, very difficult to manage. And now the Russian Federation is more pragmatical. Russia has to make the good choices with which country, how. China is our good partner, but the relation is very, I think, complicated with China because of the cultural differences, because of the interests that Chinese and Russian are sometimes common, sometimes opposite. Yes. For instance, the Central Asia. China is implanted in Central Asia, and Russia wants to be there because Russia lost its positions in Central Asia. This is a big market for Russia and for China. And the attitude of the position of Russia to the non-aligned countries now, it's not very clear. We support, of course, we support this movement, but we are not in connections with China. It's complicated with India. We try to be in India. We try to look to the Asian countries. Now I think that the politics of Russia is to be with Asia in general, not with Europe. In Russia, I feel something like reaction against Europe. The people and the politics itself, but the people prefer now to look to Asia and not to Europe. Something very interesting, something new, because of the sanctions, because of this different vision about about the future of Russia, from Europe and from about Ukraine, the different vision about Ukrainian conflicts. The Europe vision and the Russian vision is completely different. This is the propaganda for the Russian people. It's West propaganda. For the West people, it's Russian propaganda. It's a very big conflict. In reality, it's a very big conflict. And now we see that Russia wants to recuperate this place and to be not equal like the United States, but almost the same position politically. Syria is, I think, this is the occasion to recuperate the lost position of Russia. And then make China, India, not the other countries. This is the big project of Russia, to be close to Asian countries, China and India. Maybe Indonesia, yes, but China, India. And the other countries, Russia is always presented in Tehran, but it was not a very important delegation. It was somebody from the ministry. What we can understand, that Russia, it's not implicated really in this moment as observer. What to do, because now the politically thinking, Russia is very pragmatic, only national interest. This is the Putin new vision. And I think that this vision is the vision of